I never imagined that love could hurt this way. Not like a wound you see, but like poison, slow and invisible, eating away at every corner of your life. I trusted him completely. I gave him my heart, my loyalty, my very sense of self. And yet, in one cruel afternoon, everything I had built, everything I had believed, shattered. It started with a call. My heart leapt at the sound of his voice, warm and familiar, but his words were cold, unrecognizable. "You need to come to the station, now." The urgency in his tone didn't soothe me, it terrified me. I rushed, my mind racing with possibilities. What could have gone wrong? I had been careful, meticulous. I had never done anything to betray him or anyone. When I arrived, the room smelled of antiseptic and authority. He was there, sitting behind the desk, his eyes shadowed by something I had never seen before: satisfaction. Not concern, not worry, satisfaction. He told me casually, as if he were discussing the weather, that I was being accused of causing her miscarriage, his mistress, the woman I had never met, the other woman he had insisted I trust him to be faithful to in matters of heart, if not life. I laughed. I remember laughing, the sound hollow and desperate. "What are you saying? How could I possibly?" He cut me off with a hand, sharp, commanding. "The evidence is clear, witnesses, medical reports, all pointing to your interference." Interference. Me, the woman who had loved him more than she loved herself, who had never so much as uttered a cruel word to anyone he cared for. My knees gave way and I sank onto the cold floor. The room spun around me. My pleas, my protests, my desperate explanations fell like leaves in a storm, ignored, dismissed, twisted into a narrative that made me the villain in a story I didn't even know existed. And then the gods came, hands firm on my arms, pushing, dragging me into a world I had only ever feared. Metal doors clanged behind me, echoing the death of a life I thought I had. 6 years. 6 years of my life stolen, condemned for a crime I didn't commit, by the one person I had trusted with everything. As the door closed, I caught a glimpse of his face. There was no remorse, no flicker of regret, only triumph. And in that moment, a strange, cold realization settled over me. I would survive this. Somehow I would endure, because the only thing left for me now was to remember every detail of this betrayal and store it away like firewood for a winter that had yet to come. The pain of his betrayal burned, sharper than any chains or bars. I had loved him blindly, and he had repaid me with ruin. And yet, beneath the hurt, beneath the despair, a seed was planted, a quiet, unrelenting promise that one day the scales would be balanced. That day, I swore to myself, would come, but not today. Today, all I could do was breathe through the suffocating weight of injustice and pray that somehow, somewhere, the world had not completely abandoned me. And in the shadows of that cold, sterile cell, I began to imagine a life after the darkness, a life where betrayal would meet its reckoning. Prison was not merely a place of confinement. It was a crucible, and I was being forged into someone I barely recognized. The first months were the hardest. Every corner of the cell reeked of despair, sweat, and the bitter tang of injustice. Every glance from the guards, every whisper from fellow inmates reminded me that the world outside had turned against me. I was alone, completely, suffocatingly alone. At first, I wanted to break. I wanted to cry until the walls themselves absorbed my grief. I wanted to scream at him, at the universe, at anyone who would listen. But the walls offered no comfort, no justice, no understanding. I realized quickly that survival meant swallowing the agony and transforming it into something sharper, something that could not be broken. I watched people, I learned patterns. Prison was a hierarchy of fear, of leverage, of those who knew how to endure without surrendering entirely. And I endured. Each day, I repeated his betrayal in my mind like a mantra, 6 years, 6 stolen years, 6 long, cruel winters of my soul stolen by someone I had loved more than life itself. The memory burned, a constant ember beneath my skin, and it refused to die. There were moments in the dead of night when despair threatened to consume me entirely. I would lie on the hard cot, counting the cracks in the ceiling, tracing the invisible scars of injustice across my mind. And yet, even in those moments, a strange clarity emerged. If I survived, it would not be merely for freedom. It would be for justice, for reckoning, for revenge that was patient, precise, and complete. The other inmates did not know me. Some whispered about the crime, assuming my guilt. Others avoided me, sensing a quiet fire that refused to be doused. I learned to speak little and listen more, gathering information, memorizing patterns, watching weaknesses like a predator circling prey. I was careful, I was silent, but inside the storm raged on relentlessly. I refused to see him, not in my mind, not in my imagination. I refused to picture the moment he would try to manipulate me, to beg, to soften the horror he had inflicted. Every time a letter arrived, every time a visitor claimed to carry his messages, I burned it unread. I would not grant him the satisfaction of seeing me bow, even in the smallest gesture. Months turned into years. The seasons changed outside unseen as the world moved on without me, yet inside I transformed. Pain had sharpened me, injustice had honed me, and betrayal had taught me patience. I became meticulous in thought, calculating in every emotion, preparing for a future that I would control. By the end of the 6th year, I was no longer the same person who had walked into that station, shaking and innocent. I was stronger, colder, and far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. The betrayal had been a wound, yes, but from it had grown a resolve as unyielding as iron. And though I remained behind bars, I felt the first taste of freedom in my mind. The knowledge that the scales could yet be balanced, that the fire of vengeance could someday consume the one who had destroyed my life, became my sustenance. I had survived the prison, and when I walked out, he would finally see the cost of his cruelty. The first breath of air outside the prison walls was intoxicating. It wasn't just freedom, it was a revelation. The world had continued without me, indifferent and unyielding, but I had survived. I had endured 6 years of betrayal, humiliation, and isolation, and I emerged sharper, stronger, and far more deliberate than the person I had been the day I was imprisoned. I did not run into his arms. I did not answer his letters, which had piled up like dusty reminders of my suffering. Every attempt he made to reach me, every plea, every apology, every manipulative offer of reconciliation was met with silence. 6 years had taught me patience. 6 years had taught me the power of restraint. And above all, 6 years had taught me that the greatest revenge is the one that is savored in its precision. At first, life outside felt strange, almost foreign. Simple things, sunlight, open streets, the smell of rain, hit me with an intensity I hadn't known I had missed. But beneath the joy of freedom simmered a darker undercurrent. My mind was already calculating, tracing the edges of the life he had stolen from me and the steps I would take to reclaim what was mine. I began quietly, methodically. Friends I had once trusted, contacts I had cultivated before my imprisonment, all became threads in a web I was weaving. I listened, I observed, and I waited. The man who had thought he could destroy me had underestimated me. He had underestimated the resilience that betrayal had built in me, the strength that injustice had tempered, and the patience that 6 years of solitude had instilled. The first time I deliberately walked past a place he frequented, I felt a thrill, not fear, not hesitation, thrill. Every detail of his life that I could uncover became a tool. Every misstep, every flaw, every prideful moment he thought untouchable, I catalogued with precision. The man who had wielded power over me in a cruel, careless act of manipulation would soon discover that power could be turned against him. But I moved carefully. There was no rush, no impulsive confrontation. Revenge was not an emotion. It was a strategy, a plan, and it required patience. My freedom was a weapon, my mind a scalpel, and I intended to use both with unerring accuracy. Even now, I refused to see him. I refused to meet his gaze. I would not grant him the satisfaction of witnessing my life continue despite his treachery. Instead, I focused on building a life that was mine, a life filled with opportunities he could never imagine stealing from me again. And at the same time, I nurtured a quiet, sweet anticipation, the day he would face the consequences of his cruelty. Every night, as I lay in my new bed, the memory of betrayal simmered alongside a fierce determination. I would never forget what he had done, nor would I forgive him lightly. The scales had been tipped against me once, but now the balance was mine to restore. I had returned to the world, and I had returned changed, stronger, wiser, and infinitely more dangerous. And though the first steps of my revenge were subtle, careful, and hidden from view, the storm that would one day engulf him had already begun to gather. He never expected me to come back stronger, never imagined that the woman he had tried to destroy would return not broken, but sharpened, calm, composed, and in control. And yet here I was, standing on the edge of a long, awaited reckoning, my heart steady, my mind precise, every detail of the plan laid out like a symphony of consequences. I did not confront him directly at first. That would have been too easy, too satisfying in a shallow, fleeting way. No revenge, real revenge, is patience honed into art. I watched from the shadows, gathering the fragments of his life, exposing cracks he had carefully hidden. Friends, colleagues, even strangers who had unknowingly crossed him became instruments in the careful orchestration of his downfall. It began subtly, rumors planted with finesse, whispered into the right ears at the right times. Missteps, exposed without trace, made him appear careless, arrogant, vulnerable. I never needed to raise my voice, never needed to confront him with the truth. I let the world see him as he truly was, a man who manipulated, who destroyed, who betrayed without conscience. He began to falter. His allies questioned his judgment. His influence waned. The empire he had built on charm, deception, and fear started to crumble, brick by brick. And all the while, I remained invisible, untouchable, the quiet force behind every revelation, every misstep, every humiliation he could no longer control. Then came the moment I had envisioned countless times in the dark solitude of my cell, the encounter that would make him understand at last the weight of his betrayal. He reached out, of course, desperate to reconnect, to twist my silence into something that fed his ego. I refused him, cold and unyielding, letting him see only the calm surface of someone who had endured, someone who had survived, someone who now held the power. And finally, the truth of that long-ago betrayal came to light, the miscarriage, the accusation, the imprisonment, all unraveled in public view. The lies he had spun with such confidence were exposed, each false claim dismantled, each distorted narrative revealed. He could not deny it, could not escape it. And for the first time in years, the fear, the shame, the helplessness he had inflicted on me was mirrored in his own eyes. I watched quietly as the man who had stolen 6 years of my life faced ruin. The satisfaction was subtle, not shouted from the rooftops, but a quiet, unshakable knowledge that justice had been served. I did not gloat, I did not celebrate. I let him crumble under the weight of his own actions while I walked forward, free in body, mind, and spirit. And in that moment, I realized the sweetest part of revenge is not cruelty. It is reclamation. Reclaiming what was stolen, reclaiming your dignity, your sense of self, your power. I had been betrayed, yes, but betrayal had made me unbreakable. And as I turned away, leaving him to confront the consequences of his choices, I understood something profound. Freedom and justice are sweeter than any fleeting vengeance, and a life rebuilt on your own terms is the most exquisite revenge of all. I had survived, I had endured, I had triumphed, and nothing, not lies, not betrayal, not cruelty, could ever take that away from me again.